Wido agrees to live in a house at the top of a tree, but what she finds there changes everything. Sarah Jenkins was at the end of her rope, carrying 2 suitcases of clothes and holding tightly to the little hands of Tyler and Chloe, her 8- and 5-year-old children. The eviction had happened that morning and she had nowhere to go with the kids. That's when the middle-aged man approached her in the town square of the rural country town she had just arrived in. He offered something that sounded like madness, a house built high up in a 100-year-old tree, in exchange only for her taking care of the place. "You need a place to live, don't you?" asked the man, his voice gentle but laden with a sadness she couldn't identify. Sarah looked at her children, who were playing with twigs on the dusty ground. They didn't fully understand what was happening, but they felt the tension she had been carrying on her shoulders for months. "How do you know about our situation?" she replied with suspicion. "Word travels fast in a small town. I heard you arrived by bus this morning and are looking for a place. I have a proposal." Tyler tugged on his mother's dress hem, whispering that he was thirsty. Chloe started to whimper, tired from the long journey and the confusion of the last few days. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility tighten her chest even more. "What kind of proposal?" she asked, though a part of her already knew she wasn't in a position to refuse anything. The man introduced himself as Arthur Miller, owner of some land on the outskirts of town. He explained that he owned a peculiar building, a wooden house built among the sturdy branches of an ancient tree, about 3 meters off the ground. It was built a long time ago. It's been empty for years, but it's in good condition. It just needs someone to care for it, clean it, keep everything organized, he explained, avoiding looking directly into her eyes. "And how much do you want for rent?" Sarah asked, already calculating in her mind that she couldn't pay. "Nothing. I just want someone to look after the place. It has running water, electricity, everything's working. The children will have space to play, and a good school in town." The offer seemed too good to be true. Sarah had learned to be wary of free kindness, especially after so many disappointments in recent months. But looking at her hungry, tired children made any pride that remained dissolve. "Why are you doing this?" she insisted. Arthur was silent for a few seconds, watching Tyler, who had become interested in a stray mutt running by. "Let's just say I have my reasons. The house needs life, movement. It's been still for too long." Sarah couldn't decipher the expression on his face, but something in Arthur's voice made her feel he was being sincere. The options were limited. Accept the strange proposal, or spend another night outdoors with the children. "Can I see the house before deciding?" she asked. "Of course, my pickup truck is right there on the corner. We can go now." The trip to the property took about 20 minutes down a dirt road. Tyler and Chloe were excited about the ride in the pickup truck, pointing at the animals they saw along the way. Sarah tried to relax, but anxiety wouldn't leave her alone. When they arrived, she saw the structure for the first time. The wooden house was indeed suspended among the thick branches of a majestic tree, accessible by a solid wooden ladder. The structure seemed more robust than she had imagined, with 2 windows facing the open field and a small porch overlooking the horizon. "Wow, that's so cool," Tyler shouted, running toward the ladder. "It looks like a castle." Chloe clapped her hands, delighted by the novelty. For the first time in weeks, Sarah saw her children genuinely excited about something. That weighed more on the decision than any practical consideration. "Can the kids climb up?" she asked. "Of course, the ladder is sturdy and has a handrail. Let's all go see." Up there, the house was larger than it seemed from below. It had 2 small but cozy bedrooms, a living room with a fireplace, a simple kitchen, and a full bathroom. The windows offered a stunning view of the countryside and the mountains in the distance. "Mommy, can we live here, please?" Chloe asked, clinging to her mother's leg. Tyler was already exploring every nook, fascinated by the wooden beams and the construction details. Sarah had to admit, the place had a special charm, a feeling of protection and warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. "Are you sure you don't want anything in return?" she asked Arthur once more. "I am. I only ask that you promise to take good care of the place and let me know if any repairs are needed." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, weighing the decision. It could be a trap. There might be some catch she wasn't seeing. But looking at the joy on her children's faces and feeling the peace that place conveyed, she decided to trust her instinct. "I accept," she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. Arthur smiled for the first time since they'd met, but it was a melancholic smile, laden with something she couldn't identify. "Great. I'll go fetch your things in the big city. You all can stay here and explore." After he left, Sarah allowed herself to sit on the small porch and take a deep breath. The children were playing in the bedroom, making up stories about living in a treehouse. For the first time in months, she felt genuine relief. But there was also a nagging suspicion she couldn't ignore. Why would a stranger offer something like this without wanting anything in return? And why did Arthur seem so sad when talking about the house? When night fell, she put the children to sleep on the mattresses Arthur had brought along with their few belongings. Tyler and Chloe fell asleep quickly, exhausted by the day's adventure. Sarah stayed awake, listening to the sounds of nature outside and trying to get used to the feeling of being suspended in the air. It was then that she decided to explore the house more thoroughly. In the dim lamplight, she noticed details she had missed during the day. The floorboards creaked softly under her feet, and there was a smell of old wood mixed with something she couldn't identify. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. In the smaller bedroom, where she had decided to sleep, she noticed one of the floorboards was slightly raised. Curiosity got the better of her, and she managed to lift the wood carefully. Underneath was a hollow space, and her fingers touched something that felt like a box. With her heart racing, she pulled the object out and brought it into the light. It was an old shoebox tied with a faded string. She hesitated for a few seconds, but curiosity overcame any scruples about meddling with things that weren't hers. Inside the box were old photographs, some in black and white, others yellowed with age. Sarah picked up the first one and almost dropped it. The image showed a boy of about 6, playing right on that tree, with a rope tied to one of the branches. The face was unmistakable, even as a child. It was Benjamin, her late husband. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the other photos. Benjamin at various ages, always playing in the tree or around the property. Benjamin as a teenager, helping to build something that looked like the very house she was now in. Benjamin as a young man, smiling next to another young man who bore a strong resemblance to him. The last photo in the stack showed Benjamin as an adult, a few years before she had met him, doing some kind of repair on the treehouse. On the back, someone had written in faded ink, "So she may always have a home." Sarah sat down heavily on the bed, trying to process what she was seeing. Benjamin had never mentioned that place. He never talked about playing in a treehouse, never said he had family in the area. During their 5 years of marriage, he had always said he was an orphan and had no living relatives. The questions multiplied in her mind. Why had he hidden this from her? What was his relationship with Arthur? And why had that man appeared right at the moment she needed help the most? She put the photos back in the box and returned it to its hiding place, but she couldn't sleep properly. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Benjamin's face in the photographs, especially in that last one, where he seemed to be preparing something special. The next morning, Tyler and Chloe woke up excited, wanting to explore the property's surroundings. Sarah let them play in the nearby field but kept a close watch, still processing the discoveries from the night before. It was then she saw Arthur approaching with a bag in his hands. "I brought a few things for breakfast," he said, trying to keep his tone casual. "Mr. Arthur," she began, deciding to be direct, "I need to ask you a question. Did you know my husband?" She saw the man stiffen slightly, but he showed no surprise at the question. "How did you find out?" he asked, setting the bag down on the ground. "I found some old photos. Benjamin appears playing here as a child." Arthur sighed deeply and leaned against the tree trunk. "Benjamin was my younger brother." The revelation hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. During all their years of marriage, Benjamin had sworn he had no family. He had created a whole story about being an orphan, about having no one in the world but her, and later, the children. "Your brother," she repeated, incredulous. "But he always said he was an orphan, that he had no relatives." I know what he said. Benjamin had his reasons for wanting to forget the past. What reasons? Why did he never tell me about you? Arthur looked at the children, who were playing carefree in the field, and his expression softened. Benjamin and I had a terrible fight when he decided to leave town. He wanted to be a writer, dreamed of publishing books, but our parents didn't support it. They wanted him to take over the family business, to stay here and follow the plans they had for him. Sarah remembered the nights she would find Benjamin writing in a notebook, but whenever she asked, he said they were just work notes. He really wanted to be a writer, she asked. It was his dream since childhood. He was always inventing stories, writing tales. This treehouse was where he spent hours creating characters and fantastic worlds. The pieces of a puzzle began to fit together in Sarah's mind. Benjamin's sleepless nights, the melancholy that sometimes took him without explanation, the reluctance to talk about the past. Why did you fight? Our parents died in an accident when Benjamin was 20. We inherited some land and a small business. I wanted us to share the responsibilities, to run everything together. But he said if he stayed here, he would die a little each day. He wanted to go to the big city, try his luck as a writer. Arthur paused, watching Tyler, who had found an interesting stick and was showing it to his sister. I didn't understand it at the time. I thought he was being selfish, that he was abandoning the family. I said terrible things in our last conversation. Benjamin left the next day, and it was the last time we spoke. But he married me, had children, got a stable job, Sarah protested. It seems he managed to build a good life. Did he? Arthur looked at her with a sad expression. Was he truly happy? The question echoed in Sarah's mind. Benjamin was a good husband and father, but there was a constant melancholy about him, a sense that he was always carrying an invisible weight. She had always attributed it to work stress or financial responsibilities. How did you know I was at the town square yesterday? She asked, shifting the focus of the conversation. Benjamin used to write me letters. Not many, maybe one a year. He never included a return address, but he always told me a little about his life. In the last letter about 6 months ago, he told me about you and the kids. He said if anything ever happened to him, you might need help. Sarah felt a chill down her spine. 6 months ago, Benjamin had started acting strange, more affectionate than usual, making a point to say he loved her more often. She thought it was just a phase. Was he sick? The letter didn't say clearly, but there was something different in the tone. He seemed to be saying goodbye. That's why I hired a private investigator to find out where you lived. An investigator? Sarah was alarmed. Nothing invasive. I just wanted to know where you were so I could help if necessary. When I found out what happened, I started keeping an eye on your situation from afar. The revelation that she had been watched should have frightened Sarah, but strangely, she felt protected. For the first time since Benjamin died, someone was looking out for her and the children. Why didn't you introduce yourself sooner? Why all that act in the town square? Benjamin was adamant about erasing any trace of the family. He built a new identity, a new life. I thought you wouldn't want to know me, that you'd be suspicious of my motives. Sarah understood the logic, but she still felt confused by all the revelations. This house, did Benjamin help build it? It was his idea. When we were kids, he was always climbing the tree to write and dream. When we got older, we decided to build a real refuge. We spent 2 whole summers working on it. And you've kept it all this time? It was my way of keeping Benjamin close somehow. I always thought one day he'd come back, that we'd make peace. But time passed, and when I finally decided to look for him, it was too late. Chloe ran up to them at that moment, holding a small flower she had picked. "Mummy, can I plant more flowers around the tree?" she asked, not noticing the tension in the adults' conversation. "Of course, sweetie. That would be a great idea," Sarah replied, stroking the girl's hair. "Your daddy loved flowers," Arthur commented softly. "He planted some rose bushes that are still out back behind the house." Tyler approached, interested in the conversation. "Did you know our dad?" he asked. Arthur looked at Sarah, silently asking for permission. She nodded. "Yes, I did. Your dad and I grew up together. He was very smart and caring, just like you two. Did he like this tree? Chloe asked. He loved it. He spent hours up here writing stories and watching the world. Dad wrote stories? Tyler perked up. Mom always said he was really smart. Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes. The children were discovering aspects of their father that she herself had never known. He wrote wonderful stories, Arthur confirmed. They might still be around, tucked away somewhere. After the children went back to playing, Sarah and Arthur continued talking. He shared more details about Benjamin's childhood and youth, painting a portrait of a dreamy young man who felt suffocated by family expectations. He always said this treehouse was the only place where he truly felt free, Arthur explained. That's why he wanted to have it ready for you and the kids in case you needed it. Have it ready? What do you mean? The last renovation I did here was on his instructions. Benjamin sent money to install new plumbing, replace the electrical system, reinforce the structure. He knew you might come to live here. The information fell upon Sarah like a devastating revelation. Benjamin had planned all of it, had prepared a refuge for her and the children, knowing he would no longer be there to protect them. How did he know we would need a place to live? She asked, though part of her already suspected the answer. Benjamin was sick, Sarah. He found out about 8 months ago. Pancreatic cancer, advanced stage. She leaned against the treehouse ladder, feeling her legs weaken. Benjamin had spent the last months of his life knowing he was going to die, making plans to ensure she and the kids would be okay, and she had known nothing. Why didn't he tell me? She whispered. Benjamin was always like that ever since he was a boy. He carried his burdens alone, tried to protect the people he loved, even if it meant lying or hiding the truth. But I was his wife. I had a right to know, to be by his side during the illness. He said he didn't want you to suffer watching him waste away. He preferred you kept the memory of him strong and healthy. Sarah began to cry, a mixture of pain from the loss and anger at having been excluded from the decision. She felt betrayed and loved at the same time, grateful for the protection and furious about the lie. I could have helped. I could have taken care of him, she sobbed. I know, but Benjamin was stubborn. Once he made a decision, no argument could make him change his mind. And you? Why didn't you try to warn me? He made me swear I would only look for you after he was gone, and only if you really needed help. Benjamin wanted you to have a chance to move forward without carrying his burden. That night, after putting the children to bed, Sarah stayed awake on the porch, processing everything she had discovered. The full moon lit up the countryside, creating soft shadows that danced with the breeze. For the first time since Benjamin's death, she felt connected to him again. Not because of the pain of the loss, but from the understanding that he had looked after her until the very last moment, in the way he could. But there was also anger. Anger at being treated like a child who needed to be protected from the truth. Anger at not having had the chance to say a proper goodbye, to say the words that had been stuck in her throat. The next day, Arthur returned bringing groceries and some information about the area. He offered to help the children enroll in the local school and to introduce Sarah to the neighbors. You don't have to do all this, she protested. You've already done too much for us. Benjamin asked me to look after you. It's the least I can do to make up for all the lost years. But I'm not your responsibility. Neither are the children. You're my family, he said simply. The only one I have left. The word family echoed in Sarah's mind. For the last few months, she had felt completely alone in the world. Knowing there was someone who cared, even if he was a stranger until a few days ago, brought an unexpected comfort. Tyler and Chloe adapted quickly to the new routine. They explored the property every day, discovering new little corners and creating elaborate games involving the treehouse. Their joy helped Sarah stay positive, even in the most difficult moments. At school, the kids faced some comments from classmates about living in a treehouse, but the novelty soon wore off, and they made friends. The teacher, Mrs. Gable, was especially welcoming and offered to provide extra support if they needed it. The children are very polite and intelligent, she commented to Sarah during a meeting. I can tell they had a good family foundation. Their father valued learning very much, Sarah replied, feeling a pang of longing. And you? Do you have a profession? Sarah hesitated. Before getting married, she had worked as a seamstress, but she left everything behind to take care of the house and the children. Benjamin always said she didn't need to work, that he would handle everything. "I know how to sew. Maybe I could offer some services around here." What a great idea. The town needs a good seamstress. Mrs. Higgins, who used to do those services, moved to the big city last month. The possibility of having her own income excited Sarah. Since Benjamin's death, she had felt completely dependent on the goodwill of others. Having a profession again would be a way to regain some of her lost dignity. Arthur was enthusiastic about the idea and offered to lend her money to buy a sewing machine and some basic materials. "I can't accept any more borrowed money," she protested. "We already owe you too much." "You owe nothing. And consider this an investment. When the business is up and running, you pay me back. And if it doesn't work out, it will. Benjamin always said you had the magic touch for handiwork." The mention of her husband made Sarah's heart race. Benjamin had talked about her to his brother. He had been proud of the little skills she didn't even consider special. "He really talked about me." "Always. In his letters, he would tell me about the beautiful dress you made for Chloe, or how you fixed the curtains in a creative way. He was crazy about you, Sarah." I never doubted that. The words brought relief and pain at the same time. Relief to know that Benjamin genuinely loved her, pain to realize how much he carried alone. A week later, Arthur arrived with a nearly new sewing machine and several boxes of materials: fabrics, threads, buttons, zippers, ribbons. He had set up a small workshop in the corner of the Treehouse's living room. "Where did you get all this?" Sarah asked, impressed with the quality of the materials. "I bought it from a shop that was closing in the neighboring town. The owner gave me a good price for the whole lot. It must have cost a fortune. What's important is that now you have everything to start." Sarah spent the rest of the day organizing the new workspace, feeling an excitement she hadn't experienced in a long time. Having a project, something to build, gave a new meaning to her days. Tyler and Chloe were fascinated watching their mother work. She started by making small repairs to their own clothes and creating some new pieces for the children. The quality of the work caught Mrs. Gable's attention at school. "Who made this dress for Chloe?" she asked. "It's absolutely beautiful." "I did," Sarah replied with a shy smile. "I need someone to make the costumes for the school's summer harvest fair. Would you accept the job?" It was the first official order, and Sarah accepted with enthusiasm. The work garnered positive comments, and soon other mothers began to seek her out for various services: hemming pants, repairs, custom clothing. Within a few weeks, she had a small but steady clientele. The money was still little, but it represented independence and restored self-esteem. "I'm very proud of you," Arthur said, watching Sarah work one Saturday morning. "Thank you for believing in me, for giving us this opportunity. Benjamin always knew you were strong. He said you would face any challenge if necessary. Sometimes I don't feel strong. Sometimes I just want to give up on everything. That's normal. Strength isn't about not feeling fear or sadness. It's about continuing even when you do." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. As the months passed, Sarah settled into the community. The initial wariness of the neighbors gave way to acceptance and even affection. She was known as the Treehouse seamstress, and her peculiar story had become part of the local lore. It was during one of her explorations of the house that she found another hidden treasure, this time in a secret drawer of the desk that stood in the smaller bedroom. Inside were several handwritten notebooks filled with the familiar handwriting of Benjamin. The first notebook contained children's tales, charming stories about talking animals and adventurous children. The quality of the writing was impressive, far better than Sarah had imagined her husband was capable of. The second notebook was more personal, a sort of diary where Benjamin wrote about his inner conflicts, abandoned dreams, and love for the family he had built. One particularly moving entry read, "Sarah doesn't know, but she saved my life the day she agreed to marry me. I was lost, directionless, carrying the guilt of having abandoned Arthur and the family responsibilities. She gave me a purpose, a reason to be better than I thought I could be. Another entry, more recent, revealed, I found out the test results today. I don't know how I'm going to tell Sarah. Maybe it's better not to tell her. I want her to remember me happy, not as a sick and desperate man. I need to make sure she and the children will be okay when I'm no longer here. Sarah cried, reading every page, finally understanding the extent of the sacrifice Benjamin had made. He carried the weight of the illness alone, planned her future in silence, protected her even from his own vulnerability. The third notebook contained detailed plans, instructions about the treehouse, important contacts, suggestions on how she could rebuild her life. An entire page was dedicated to ideas about how she could use her sewing skills to become financially independent. Sarah has an extraordinary talent that she herself doesn't recognize, he had written. If she can find clients, she will be able to support the family with dignity. Arthur should help her in the first few months until she gets established. It was as if Benjamin had orchestrated everything from beyond the grave, anticipating every challenge and preparing solutions. On the last page of the notebook, there was a letter addressed to her. My dear Sarah, if you are reading this, it means our time together has come to an end, but it also means you have found the strength to move forward. I know you are angry with me for hiding the illness. I know you feel you should have been by my side during the hard times, but you were with me every day. You were there when I woke up smiling beside you, when you made coffee with care, when you told stories to the children, when you waited for me to come home from work with that hug that erased any sadness. I didn't want you to see me weak, because I am not weak. I am the man you loved, who built a beautiful family with you, who learned to be a father by watching you be a mother. The illness was just a technical detail. It didn't change who I was inside. Arthur will take care of you. He is good, even if stubborn. Forgive him for the lost years, as I hope you forgive me for the secrets kept. We men of the Miller family have the flaw of wanting to carry the world on our shoulders alone. The treehouse was my refuge as a child, but now it is your home. Tyler and Chloe will grow up free there, as I always dreamed of growing up, and you will find your strength, your independence, your happiness again. Don't rush to forget the pain. She is part of the love we feel for each other, but don't get lost in her forever either. You have so much life ahead of you, so much love to give and receive. The children need you to be happy. I need you to be happy. With all my eternal love, Benjamin. Sarah held the letter to her chest and cried, as she hadn't cried in months. It was a mixture of pain and relief, of longing and gratitude. Benjamin had found a way to say a proper goodbye, even though he was no longer there. That night she talked at length with Tyler and Chloe about their father. She showed the stories he had written, explained the dreams he had, about the love he felt for the family. Daddy loved us very much, didn't he? Chloe asked, flipping through one of the story notebooks. He loved us more than anything in the world, Sarah confirmed. Why didn't he publish these books? Tyler wanted to know. The stories are really cool. Sometimes adults forget to chase their own dreams, too busy taking care of other important things, like family. Do you think we can still publish them? Tyler insisted. The question planted a seed in Sarah's mind. Why not try to fulfill the dream Benjamin never got to realize? The following week she talked to Arthur about the possibility. I think it's a wonderful idea, he said, excited. Benjamin would be moved knowing his writings could touch other people. But I don't understand anything about publishers, how the literary world works. We can learn together. The internet has lots of information on how to publish books independently. They spent weeks researching, studying the children's book market, understanding the publishing processes. Arthur offered to cover the initial costs, and Sarah took responsibility for editing and organizing the texts. The first book collected 5 stories Benjamin had written, all with simple illustrations Sarah made based on his descriptions. She wasn't a professional artist, but she had the magic touch for creating delicate images that complemented the stories. When the first copies were ready, she took one to Tyler and Chloe's school. Mrs. Gable was delighted with the quality of the stories and offered to spread the word among other teachers in the area. These stories are truly special, she commented. They have a rare sensitivity. They speak directly to children's hearts. The book began to circulate in the community. selling by word of mouth. The children liked the adventures Benjamin had created, and the parents appreciated the subtle lessons of values and friendship that permeated each tale. Within a few months, Sarah had sold the entire first print run and was preparing a second. The money from sales, combined with her sewing earnings, provided a financial stability she hadn't experienced in a long time. But more important than the financial aspect was the feeling of honoring Benjamin's memory in a concrete way. Every child who read one of his stories took a little piece of him into their own life. "Daddy is famous," Chloe remarked one day, seeing one of the neighbors reading the book to her children. "He always wanted to be famous for the stories he wrote," Sarah explained. "Now he is, even though he's no longer here." Tyler, who had become the book's top seller among his schoolmates, suggested they make more books with other stories from his father. "Are there more notebooks hidden in the house?" he asked hopefully. "I haven't looked everywhere yet," Sarah admitted. This became a family treasure hunt. On weekends, Sarah, Tyler, Chloe, and sometimes Arthur explored every corner of the treehouse in search of more of Benjamin's writings. They found 2 more notebooks, one with more mature stories aimed at preteens, and another with notes on writing techniques and ideas for future literary projects. "He really took it seriously," Arthur commented, flipping through the technical notes. "He studied other authors, analyzed narrative structures. It wasn't just a hobby." "Why didn't our parents support him?" Sarah asked. They had a very practical view of life. They thought art was for rich people, that poor folks had to be content with serious jobs. They couldn't understand that writing could also be a respectable profession. "And you? Did you support Benjamin's dreams?" Arthur sighed, an expression of regret crossing his face. "Deep down I did, but I was older. I felt the responsibility of keeping the family together, of taking care of the legacy our parents left behind. I thought if Benjamin left, he'd be abandoning all of that. You were both too young to carry so much weight." "We were, and too proud to admit we were scared. Benjamin was afraid of failing as a writer. I was afraid of failing as the older brother. In the end, we hurt each other trying to protect our fears." This conversation brought Sarah even closer to Arthur. She began to see him not just as the generous brother-in-law, but as a man who had also suffered losses, who also carried guilt and regrets. As Benjamin's second book took shape, Sarah decided she wanted to do something special to launch it. The idea came up in a conversation with Mrs. Gable. What about organizing a literary event at the treehouse itself? It would be something unique, the teacher got excited. An afternoon of storytelling in a magical setting like this. The children in the area would love it. Arthur was initially hesitant. "So many people climbing the tree, will the structure hold?" "We can do it in small groups, rotating the children, and anyone who just wants to listen can stay under the tree." The idea evolved into a larger event, involving the whole community. Sarah would read Benjamin's stories, there would be a small exhibition about the book creation process, and she would sell copies at a special discount. The weeks of preparation were intense but enjoyable. Tyler and Chloe got completely involved, creating posters by hand and helping decorate the property. Arthur built makeshift benches and installed some lights to illuminate the area in case the event went into the evening. On the appointed day, many more people showed up than Sarah had expected. Whole families, teachers from other schools, and even residents from neighboring towns who had heard about the event by word of mouth. "Wow, so many people," Chloe whispered, a little nervous with all the activity. "Dad would be so happy seeing this," Tyler remarked, watching the children gathering around the base of the tree. Sarah climbed up to the treehouse porch to begin the first reading session. Looking down, she saw dozens of curious little faces turned up toward her. For a moment, she felt intimidated by the responsibility. But when she began to read the first story, Benjamin's voice echoed through her. The words flowed naturally. The children listened in respectful silence, and she felt a deep connection with the husband who had passed on. Each story was met with enthusiastic applause. The children asked questions about the characters, wanted to know if there would be sequels, if they would know other books by that author. "Is the writer still making new stories?" a little girl asked. Sarah hesitated, but Tyler stepped forward. "Our dad wrote these stories before he went to live in heaven. Now it's my mom who takes care of publishing them, so everyone can know them. The boy's simple and honest answer touched many of the adults present. Some approached afterward to say they had also lost loved ones and identified with the idea of keeping memories alive through meaningful projects. The event was a complete success. Sarah sold all the copies she had brought and even took orders for more than 50 books. Several people left their contact information, interested in commissioning sewing work. "You were amazing," Arthur said, helping to take down the decorations after everyone had left. "It was moving. I felt as if Benjamin were here, taking part in everything." He was. Through his words, through you, through the children who heard the stories, love doesn't die, it just changes form. That night, after putting Tyler and Chloe to bed, Sarah sat on the porch and looked at the stars. For the first time since Benjamin's death, she felt whole. Not because the pain had passed, but because she had found a way to transform it into something positive. The treehouse, which had begun as a desperate refuge, had become a real home. More than that, it was becoming a space for sharing art and culture with the entire community. In the following months, other reading sessions were organized, always with great attendance. Sarah created a routine. Once a month, on the first Saturday, the treehouse would host families for an afternoon of stories and games. The success of Benjamin's books caught the attention of a small publisher from the big city, which was interested in reprinting them with wider distribution. Sarah was torn between excitement about the opportunity and fear of losing control over her husband's legacy. "It's an important decision," Arthur agreed when she asked for his opinion. "But think of the reach the stories could have." Benjamin always dreamed of seeing his books in a bookstore, being read by children all over the country. What if they change something, if they distort the essence of his work? You can negotiate the contract terms, ensure you have editorial control. You don't have to accept anything. After several conversations with the publisher and a lot of research on literary contracts, Sarah decided to accept the proposal. The terms guaranteed that she would retain the copyright and have veto power over any changes to the original content. Benjamin's first book with the publisher was released 6 months later, with an initial print run of 5,000 copies. Sarah insisted that the author's biography mention the story of the treehouse and her role in preserving the writings. Tyler and Chloe were proud when they saw their father's book in a bookstore in the neighboring town. "Look, Mommy!" Chloe shouted, running to the children's section. "Daddy's book is here just like the other famous writers." "Dad achieved his dream," Tyler said more seriously, picking up a copy and carefully flipping through it. "Yes," Sarah agreed, moved. "And you helped make it happen. If you hadn't encouraged me to look for his notebooks, none of this would have happened." The national success of the books also brought visibility to Sarah's sewing work. Some magazines ran stories about the widow who lives in a treehouse and publishes her late husband's books, generating interest from people in other regions. She began receiving custom clothing orders from clients from various parts of the country who made a point of working with the famous treehouse seamstress. It was a nickname that initially embarrassed her, but which she eventually accepted with good humor. "Famous by association," she joked with Arthur. "Benjamin was the talented one. I just sew." "Don't downplay your merit. Benjamin wrote the stories, but you were the one who brought them into the world. And your sewing is also art, in its own way." The combined income from the books and sewing allowed Sarah to make some improvements to the treehouse. She installed a heating system for the winter, renovated the kitchen, and created a larger workspace for sewing. Arthur suggested she officially purchase the property, but she preferred to keep the informal arrangement they had. "This land belongs to the Miller family," she said. "I'm just the temporary caretaker. Tyler and Chloe can decide what to do when they grow up." "You are a Miller too," he reminded her. "And they are Millers. The land is rightfully yours. Maybe one day. For now I'm happy like this." The truth was that Sarah had grown accustomed to the feeling of temporariness. It was as if keeping life in motion, without settling in too much, was a way to honor the adventurous spirit that Benjamin was never able to fully exercise. As Tyler and Chloe grew, they developed more defined personalities. Tyler showed an interest in writing, always inventing continuations for his father's stories or creating new adventures for the same characters. Chloe had inherited her mother's manual skill and loved helping with sewing work, especially creating small accessories and decorations for clothes. "You're developing your dad's and mom's talents," Sarah observed one weekend, watching Tyler write while Chloe embroidered. "Do you think Dad would be proud?" Tyler asked. "I'm sure. He always said he wanted you to follow your own dreams, to be whatever you wanted to be." "And you, Mom? What was your dream?" Chloe wanted to know. The question caught Sarah off guard. She had spent so many years focused on the family's needs that she had forgotten to think about her own desires. "I think my dream was to have a happy family," she answered after a while. "And I did, even if not in the way I imagined." "But what about now? Do you have new dreams?" Sarah reflected on the question. In the last 2 years, she had rebuilt her life in a way she never thought possible. She had work, a home, stability, and recognition for her effort to preserve Benjamin's legacy. But there was also a feeling that something was missing, an element she couldn't clearly define. "I think my dream now is to see you grow up happy and fulfill your own dreams," she answered diplomatically. "But that's a mother's dream," Tyler protested. "What is your dream, independent of us?" Her son's insistence made her think seriously about the question for the first time in years. What did she really want for herself? That night, she had a long conversation with Arthur about the subject. "Tyler asked me a question today that I couldn't answer properly," she told him. "What are my personal dreams besides being a mother? And what did you conclude?" "That I don't know anymore. It's been so long since I thought of myself as an individual that I've lost track of what I want." "That's normal. You've been through enormous changes in recent years. It's natural that you need time to rediscover who you are now." "Sometimes I feel I've turned into an edited version of myself, the courageous widow, the dedicated mother, the successful entrepreneur. But where is the real Sarah?" Arthur smiled understandingly. "The real Sarah is right there, asking difficult questions, questioning her own motivations. A fake person wouldn't have that concern." "How do you get to know yourself again after a great loss?" "I don't know if there's a formula. In my case, I discovered I had spent my whole life being the responsible older brother, without ever having the chance to be just Arthur. Taking care of you gave me the opportunity to be generous without being controlling, to help without imposing." "And do you like who you discovered you are?" "Most of the time, yes. And you? Do you like who you've become?" Sarah thought about the question for several days. She liked the independence she had gained, the security she had managed to provide for her children, the respect she had earned in the community. But there was a growing restlessness, a feeling that something important was missing. It was during one of the reading sessions in the Treehouse that she had a revelation. One of the children present asked a question about how the stories were created, and Sarah realized she was also curious about the creative process. "Haven't you ever wanted to write your own stories?" the girl asked. "I never thought about it," Sarah answered honestly. "But you know your husband's stories better than anyone. You must have ideas about how to continue some of them." The observation planted a seed in Sarah's mind. She really did have ideas about Benjamin's characters. Sometimes while reading to the children, she imagined different developments for the adventures, or mentally created new scenarios for the same protagonists. That night, for the first time in her life, she picked up a blank notebook and started to write. She had no intention of creating something publishable. It was just an exercise of personal curiosity. But the words flowed with surprising naturalness. The story she created was a continuation of one of Tyler's favorite adventures, exploring what happened to the characters after the original ending. When she showed the result to the children, they were thrilled. "Mom, you write really well," Tyler said, excited. "It's like Dad is writing with you." "Are you going to make a book?" Chloe asked. "I don't know, it was just for fun." "But did you like writing?" Tyler insisted. Sarah reflected on the experience. There was something deeply satisfying about the process of creating a story, of bringing characters and situations to life through words. It was different from any activity she had tried before. "I did," she admitted. "I liked it a lot." In the following days, she continued writing, exploring different ideas and styles. She discovered she had a knack for dialogue and descriptions of feelings, especially when writing about family relationships and overcoming difficulties. Arthur became interested when he learned about her new hobby. "Can I read something?" he asked. "I don't know. It's still very amateur, very rough." "Let me be the judge of that." She showed him 3 short stories she had written, all inspired by real experiences she had lived or observed in the community. Arthur read in silence, focused, making notes in the margins. "Sarah," he said when he finished, "you have a natural talent for this. Don't exaggerate." "I'm not exaggerating. Your stories have an authenticity, a sensitivity that is very rare. They're different from Benjamin's, but they have their own quality." "You really think so?" "I'm sure. And more importantly, you enjoy writing. I can tell by the way your eyes light up when you talk about the stories." That observation made Sarah realize she had found something she had been looking for without knowing it. Writing wasn't just a pastime. It was a form of expression that connected her to herself in a profound way. She began dedicating a few hours each week to writing, always after she put the children to bed. It was time just for her, an activity unrelated to her responsibilities as a mother, widow, or entrepreneur. Within a few months, she had accumulated enough material for a small book. Stories about women facing various challenges, a grandmother who went back to school at 70, a young mother who discovered strength she didn't know she had, a teenager learning to deal with being different. "So you should try to publish," Tyler suggested after reading some of the stories. "I don't know, they're very personal, very simple. Dad's stories were simple too, and look how successful they were. It's different. His stories had magic, fantasy. Mine are just about ordinary people going through ordinary problems." "But that's cool too," Chloe interjected. "People like to read about other people like them." The children were right. Sarah knew it. But publishing her own writing meant exposing herself in a much more vulnerable way than when she published Rodrigo's work. It was Joaquim who convinced her to take the next step. Rodrigo faced the fear of rejection and never published anything in his lifetime, he argued. You have the chance to do it differently, to try while you're still here to see the result. And what if no one likes it? What if they discover I have no talent? What if they do like it? What if they discover you have a lot of talent? The fear of failure can't be greater than the desire to try. Sarah decided to start small. She submitted one of the stories to a regional literary magazine without high expectations. Weeks later, she received an acceptance letter informing her that the text would be published in the next issue. The feeling of seeing her name printed in a publication associated with work she had created from scratch was incomparable. It was different from the satisfaction of publishing Tyler's books, because this time it was genuinely hers. Pedro and Anna were proud when they saw the magazine at the town's newsstand. "Look, Mom, you're really famous now," Anna said, showing the page with her story. "It's not really fame," Sarah laughed. "It's just a small magazine." "But it's a start," Pedro observed, wise for his 10 years. Dad also started by just writing for himself. The comparison with Rodrigo made her reflect on the parallels between their 2 journeys. Both had discovered a love for writing as a way to deal with personal issues. Both had faced doubts about their own talent. The difference was that she had the opportunity to pursue the dream while she was still alive to enjoy it. Encouraged by the positive reception of her first publication, she submitted other stories to different outlets. Not all were accepted, but many were, and each publication increased her confidence as a writer. A year later, she had enough material and enough courage to propose a book to the same publisher that published Rodrigo's work. "What an interesting coincidence," the editor commented during the meeting. "The widow who manages her writer husband's books discovers she's also a writer." "I don't want my work to be seen as an extension of his," Sarah clarified. "They are completely different things." "I understand perfectly. And after reading the manuscripts you sent, I can assure you they are independent works with their own quality." Sarah's first book was launched 2 years after she began writing seriously. It was a collection of stories about women discovering strengths they didn't know they possessed, each story based on real experiences she had lived or witnessed. The launch took place at the Treehouse itself in a special session where she read excerpts from the book to a mixed audience of children and adults. The reception was warm, and several people commented that they deeply identified with the characters. "Your stories speak directly to those who have been through similar difficulties," one of the neighbors commented. "It's good to know we're not alone in our challenges." "That's exactly what I wanted to convey," Sarah replied. "That all of us have more strength than we imagine." Pedro and Ana, now 12 and 9 years old respectively, had become their mother's biggest supporters in her literary projects. Pedro continued writing his own stories and was beginning to show promising talent for creating complex plots. Ana had become interested in illustration and created drawings to accompany both her brother's and her mother's texts. "Looks like we're going to have a family of artists," Joaquim joked during a Sunday lunch. "Dad would be proud," Ana said. "His treehouse became a place full of stories." "It became more than that," Sarah observed. "It became a place where stories become reality." It was true. The treehouse had transformed into an informal little cultural hub for the region. Beyond the monthly reading sessions, Sarah began offering creative writing workshops for children and teenagers. The demand was so great, she had to start a waiting list. Parents from neighboring towns brought their children to participate in the activities, and the treehouse gained recognition as an innovative space for promoting literature. "Have you ever thought of making this official?" Arthur suggested. "Creating an NGO or a cultural institute?" "I don't want to bureaucratize something that emerged so organically," Sarah replied. "But maybe it's worth thinking about ways to expand the work." "How so?" "Other communities could have similar projects, not necessarily tree houses, but spaces dedicated to encouraging reading and writing among children." The idea evolved during conversations with educators and people interested in children's literature. Sarah began receiving invitations to speak about her experience at schools and libraries in other towns. In her talks, she told the story of the treehouse, spoke about the importance of preserving memory through art, and encouraged other parents and teachers to create spaces that foster creativity. "Literature doesn't have to be something distant and elitist," she would say in her presentations. "It can be born from simple experiences, from the everyday lives of ordinary people who have stories to tell." The success of the talks led to invitations to participate in literary fairs and cultural events. Sarah found herself traveling across the state, always accompanied by Tyler and Chloe, who became part of the presentation by sharing what it was like growing up in a treehouse surrounded by stories. "Our life turned into an adventure," Chloe commented during one of the trips. "It started with us needing a place to live, and now we're seeing new places because of books." "Did Dad plan all this?" Tyler wanted to know. "I think Dad planted the seed," Sarah answered, "but we're the ones who made it grow and become this big tree full of branches." The tree metaphor became a constant in Sarah's reflections on the family's journey. Benjamin had been the root, providing the solid foundation. She and the children were the branches, growing in different directions but always connected to the main trunk. Arthur had also found his place in this expanded family. He became the dedicated uncle, the project partner, the guardian of family traditions. The relationship between the siblings-in-law evolved into a deep friendship based on mutual respect and a shared love for Benjamin's memory. "Sometimes I think about what it would be like if Benjamin were still here," Sarah said one afternoon, watching the children play in the field. "It would be different, for sure," Arthur replied, "but not necessarily better. You discovered strengths and talents you might not have discovered if life had been easier. Do you think all the suffering was worth it? I don't know if it's a question of being worth it. The suffering happened. We had no choice in that. But what you did with it, how you transformed pain into creation, that was an admirable choice." Arthur's words made Sarah reflect on the journey she had traveled. From a desperate widow who agreed to live in a treehouse for lack of options, she had transformed into a recognized writer, a confident mother, and a respected community leader. More importantly, she had found a way to honor Benjamin's memory that went beyond simple preservation. She had continued the story he began, adding new chapters, new characters, new meanings. On the 5th anniversary of the move to the treehouse, Sarah organized a special party. She invited everyone who had been part of the journey, neighbors, teachers, workshop students, editors. other writers she had met along the way. The property was full of life, with children running between the trees, adults talking about literature, teenagers reciting poems they had written in the workshops. Tyler, now a young 14-year-old writer, gave a moving speech about how the treehouse had shaped his worldview. "Living here taught me that home isn't a physical place, but where you feel safe to be who you really are," he said. "Our house is high up in a tree, but our roots are in the story my dad started and my mum continued." Chloe, at 11, had become a talented illustrator and was working on the illustrations for her mother's second book. "The treehouse is magical," she said in her part of the speech, "not because of spells or special powers, but because here people transform. Mom became a writer, Tyler became a poet, I became an artist, and Uncle Arthur became our second dad." The comment about Arthur moved everyone present, especially him, who had indeed become a father figure to the children without ever trying to replace Benjamin. When it was her turn to speak, Sarah looked at the crowd gathered around the tree and felt a deep gratitude for all the paths life had taken. "When I first arrived here, I was running away," she began. "Running from pain, from responsibilities, from the feeling that I wouldn't be able to raise my children alone. I thought I was accepting charity from a stranger, but I discovered it wasn't charity. It was a gift my husband had prepared for us, even though he was no longer here to deliver it in person. And more than a house, it was an opportunity for us to discover who we really were when we had nothing left to lose. I learned that strength isn't about never falling, but knowing how to get up when you do fall. I learned that family isn't just who you're born with, but who chooses to stay with you. And I learned that the best stories aren't the ones with happy endings, but the ones with hopeful new beginnings. This treehouse taught us that we can grow anywhere as long as we have strong roots and aren't afraid to reach for the sky." The audience applauded for long minutes, many with tears in their eyes. It was impossible not to be moved by the transformation that family had lived through and by the positive impact their work was having on the community. When the party ended and everyone had left, Sarah was alone on the house's porch, watching the sunset paint the horizon orange and pink. Tyler and Chloe had gone to sleep at a friend's house to keep celebrating. Arthur had returned to his own house in town. It was rare for her to have moments of complete solitude, and she took the opportunity to reflect on everything that had happened in the last 5 years. She remembered the desperate woman who had accepted the strange offer to live in a treehouse. That woman could barely imagine a future for herself and her children. Now she was able to dream not only about her own future, but about ways to help others discover their own paths. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was an invitation to participate in a national literary festival as one of the breakthrough writers of the year. "What an honor," she said to the organizer, "but I need to check if I can arrange things with the children and the work here." "Of course, we understand perfectly. We know your priority is family and the local community. That's exactly what makes your work so authentic." After hanging up, Sarah smiled to herself. She had learned to receive recognition without letting ego take over, to value opportunities without forgetting her responsibilities. Even more importantly, she had learned that success wasn't measured just by book sales or event invitations. Success was seeing Tyler writing with passion, Chloe illustrating with creativity, an entire community more interested in literature, families growing closer through shared stories. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out, now continuing. That night, for the first time in years, Sarah picked up the notebook where Benjamin had written his farewell letter. She reread his words, but this time without the piercing pain she had felt on her first reading. "You will find your strength, your independence, your happiness again," he had written. And she had found it. Not in the way he might have imagined, perhaps, but in a way that surprised even herself. Inspired, she took her own notebook and began writing a letter to Benjamin. She knew he could never read it, but she felt the need to share everything that had happened, everything she had discovered about herself and about life. "Dear Benjamin," she began, 5 years have passed since I agreed to live in the treehouse you prepared for us. At first I thought I was accepting charity, Today I understand I was accepting a challenge, the challenge of discovering who I really was, when I stripped away all the layers of dependent wife, helpless widow, desperate mother. I discovered I am a writer. I never imagined it, never dreamed of this possibility. But the words flow from me as if they had always been there, just waiting for the right moment to emerge. It's a different talent from yours, more focused on real experiences, on stories of overcoming and discovery, but it is mine, genuinely mine. Tyler inherited your passion for writing, but with his own style. He creates fantastic worlds full of impossible adventures. Chloe inherited my manual skill, but applied to drawing. Together we are creating projects that mix his stories with mine, his words with her images. Arthur became part of our family in a way I never imagined possible. He didn't try to replace you, but found his own place in our hearts. The children have in him a solid father figure, and I have a reliable partner for all projects and challenges. The treehouse became more than our home. It became a symbol of rebirth, of transformation, of unexpected possibilities. People from all over the region come here seeking inspiration, to participate in activities, to discover talents they didn't know they possessed. Your books are becoming successful all over the country. Children from places we don't even know exist are meeting the characters you created, learning values you considered important. Your dream came true in a much bigger way than you could have imagined. But you know what makes me proudest? It's that I managed to continue your story without trying to imitate it. I found my own voice, my own path, my own way of contributing to the world. You planted the seed, but I was the one who chose how to cultivate it. Sometimes I still miss you in a physical way, especially during important moments like the children's graduations or new book launches. I wish you could see in person how they've grown, how they've become amazing and talented people. But then I remember that you are present in other ways. You are in the work ethic Tyler shows when he writes. You are in the generosity Chloe shows when she teaches drawing to younger children. You are in my courage to take risks, to try new things, to not settle for a small life. Thank you for preparing all of this for us. Thank you for believing that I would be capable of reinventing myself, even when I myself didn't believe it. Thank you for planting seeds that continue to sprout years later. I know you would be proud of who we have become, and I hope you know that the story you started is far from over. There are many chapters yet to be written, many adventures yet to be lived, many people yet to inspire. With eternal love and endless gratitude, Sarah. After finishing the letter, she felt a peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. It was as if she had closed an important chapter, not to forget Benjamin, but to honor him in the best way possible, by living fully the life he had made possible. In the following months, Sarah continued expanding her work. Beyond the local workshops, she began training other educators to replicate the Treehouse methodology in different communities. The idea was to create a network of story houses, spaces not necessarily in trees, but always unique, special, and inviting for children and adults to connect with literature. The project gained support from education and culture departments in various municipalities. Within 2 years, there were 15 story houses operating in different towns across the state, each adapted to local characteristics, but following the basic principles Sarah had developed. Tyler, now 16, had become her official assistant in the trainings, helping to teach storytelling techniques and literary creation. Chloe, at 13, was responsible for the visual part of the projects, creating graphic identities for each new story house and illustrated educational materials for the activities. "You've become my true partners," Sarah said during one of their work trips. "We started as a family that needed help, and now we're a team that helps other families." "It's cool to see that our story can inspire other people to change their own stories," Tyler observed. "And it's cool that each place adapts the ideas in a different way," Chloe added. "The story house in the coastal town is in a beach cabin. The one in the mining town is in a cave. Each has its own personality." The growth of the project brought new challenges and responsibilities. Sarah had to learn about management, strategic planning, and fundraising, skills she never imagined needing, but which she developed with the same determination she had applied to writing. Arthur continued to be her main advisor, offering the business experience she lacked. He had officially become a partner in the project, responsible for the administrative side while she handled the pedagogical content. "I never imagined I'd be an education entrepreneur," he joked during a planning meeting. "Benjamin would be surprised to see how life has led us down such unexpected paths." "I think he would be satisfied," Sarah replied. "He always said he wanted his stories to reach many children. Now not only have they reached them, but they've inspired other people to tell their own stories." The work was becoming nationally recognized when Sarah received a proposal that left her uncertain. An international publisher wanted to publish a book about the Treehouse methodology for distribution in several countries. It would be an incredible opportunity to take the project beyond Brazil's borders, the editor explained. "There's interest from educators in Latin American countries and even Europe." "But I'm not a formal educator. I don't have academic credentials to validate the method," Sarah argued. "You have something much more valuable: proven, practical experience and documented results. Dozens of communities have already implemented your ideas with measurable success." The proposal made her reflect on how far she was willing to take the project. Expanding internationally would mean more travel, more responsibilities, less time for personal writing and for family life. During a family conversation, she shared her doubts with Tyler, Chloe, and Arthur. "What do you all think? Should we accept, or is it too big for us?" "It depends on what you really want," Tyler replied, mature for his 16 years. "If the goal is to spread the idea to help more children, then it's worth it. If it's just to become famous, then no." "I want to help more children," Sarah said without hesitation. "That's always been it." "Then the answer is right there," Chloe concluded. "And we'll help however we can. We're already a team anyway." "And I'll handle all the boring contract and logistics stuff," Arthur offered. "You focus on what you do best, teaching and inspiring." The decision was made. Sarah accepted the proposal, but with specific conditions. She would keep the base of operations in the Treehouse, would not give up quality time with her children, and would continue developing her own writing projects. The book, The Treehouse: How Stories Transform Communities, was published simultaneously in Portuguese, Spanish, and English. The reception was extraordinary, generating invitations for lectures and consultations in various countries. Sarah found herself traveling the world, always accompanied by Tyler and Chloe when possible, telling the story of the Treehouse and teaching educators from different cultures how to adapt the methodology to their local realities. "Mom's become an international author," Chloe joked during a layover at the Barcelona airport on the way to a conference in Spain. "I still can't quite believe it," Sarah admitted. 5 years ago, I didn't even know where we'd sleep, and now we're going to teach people on another continent. Dad would be bursting with pride if he could see this," Tyler said, flipping through the Spanish version of his mother's book. The mention of their father brought a pang of longing, but also a feeling of deep gratitude. Benjamin had made all of that possible by planting the seed of the Treehouse and by preserving his own stories so they could inspire others to create their own. During the conference in Barcelona, Sarah met a Brazilian educator who was developing a similar project in a favela in Rio de Janeiro. "Your work reached us through an online article," the educator explained. "We adapted the idea by creating a story house on a rooftop slab, since we don't have big trees in the community." "And did it work?" "Very well. The children loved having a different, special space just for literature, and we discovered many hidden talents among them. Stories like this multiplied. Sarah constantly received messages from people who had been inspired by the project to create their own initiatives. Teachers who transformed classrooms into more creative environments, parents who created special reading nooks at home, librarians who innovated in ways to engage children with books. It's amazing how an idea can multiply," Arthur observed, reading the messages coming in from all over the world. "Benjamin planted a seed. You cultivated it, and now it's generating an entire forest." "Sometimes I feel a bit too responsible for all of this," Sarah confessed, "as if I have to manage all the expectations." "You don't have to manage everything," he reassured her. "Your responsibility is to keep the essence of the project alive, to ensure it remains genuine. The rest will grow naturally." The advice was wise. Sarah realized she was being too hard on herself. trying to control developments that should flow organically. She decided to focus on what really mattered, to continue developing quality content, to support local initiatives without trying to control them, and to maintain the balance between work and personal life. It was around this time that she began working on what she considered her most important project, a series of books telling the true stories of people who had overcome adversity through creativity and artistic expression. Each book in the series would portray a different person: an elderly woman who discovered painting at 70, a homeless teenager who became a rapper, a single mother who opened a pottery studio in her own kitchen. I want to show that personal transformation is possible at any age, under any circumstance, she explained to the editors, and that art is not a privilege for those with money or formal education. The first book in the series told her own story, from widowhood to international recognition. But instead of focusing on the glamorous aspects, she highlighted the difficulties, the doubts, the moments of almost giving up. "Why do you want to show the hard parts?" the editor asked. "People like inspiring stories, not depressing ones." "Precisely because of that. An inspiring story isn't the one that only shows the happy ending, but the one that shows how to get there. People need to know that it's normal to feel fear. It's normal to fail sometimes. It's normal to doubt yourself." Sarah's autobiographical book became a publishing phenomenon, especially among women who had experienced significant losses or were facing transitional moments in their lives. She began receiving thousands of messages from readers, sharing their own stories of overcoming, many inspired by her narrative to try new things, going back to school, starting their own businesses, expressing themselves artistically. "Your story is helping other people rewrite their own stories," Tyler observed, reading some of the letters that arrived. "That's what Benjamin always wanted to happen with his writings," Sarah replied, "that they would touch real people, that they would make a difference in someone's life. And it's working even better than he imagined. His stories inspired you. Yours are inspiring thousands of other people. It's like a chain reaction of good." The chain reaction analogy made Sarah think about the lasting impact a single positive action could have. Benjamin had planted a seed by preparing the treehouse. She had cultivated that seed by transforming it into larger projects. Now, thousands of people were planting their own seeds inspired by what she had shared. It was thinking about this that she decided to create an official foundation to support people who wanted to develop creative projects in their communities. The Treehouse Legacy Foundation would offer microcredit, training and mentorship for initiatives that promoted literature, art and creative education in resource-poor areas. "We want to democratize access to artistic expression," Sarah explained during the foundation's launch, "to show that anyone anywhere can create something beautiful and meaningful if they have the necessary tools and support." Tyler and Chloe, now 19 and 16 respectively, took on more active roles in the foundation. Tyler coordinated projects related to writing and literature, while Chloe handled visual arts initiatives. Arthur became the chairman of the board, ensuring that resources were applied transparently and efficiently. "We've truly become a family business," he joked during a board meeting. "Who would have thought that the offer of a treehouse would result in all this?" "Benjamin knew," Sarah said with conviction. "Maybe not the details, but he knew we were destined to do something bigger together." On the 10th anniversary of the move to the treehouse, Sarah organized a special event, a 3-day festival celebrating stories of personal and community transformation. The festival took place on the original property, but extended throughout the entire region, involving dozens of story houses that had emerged in previous years. People from all over Brazil and several other countries attended to participate in workshops, lectures, presentations, and especially to share their own stories of overcoming adversity. 10 years ago, I was sitting in that town square with 2 suitcases and 2 children, not knowing what would become of our lives, Sarah said at the festival's opening. Today we are here gathered with hundreds of people who have transformed their own difficulties into reasons to create, to help, to grow. The treehouse taught me that home isn't where you are, but who you become. And family isn't just who you're born with, but who chooses to walk beside you on the journey to become the best version of yourself. Every person here represents a seed that germinated, a story that transformed from tragedy into triumph, a life that decided to be bigger than the circumstances that tried to limit it. Tyler had become a promising writer, with 2 published books and several young literary awards. During the festival, he launched his 3rd book, a collection of stories inspired by the people he had met through his mother's work. Chloe was finishing high school and had already been accepted into a renowned visual arts school. Her illustrations decorated all the foundation's graphic materials, and she was preparing her first solo exhibition. "You've become everything Benjamin dreamed you could be," Arthur said to Sarah during a break between the festival's activities. "We have become all of this," she corrected. "You are also part of this family, this story. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like if Benjamin were here to see everything. He is seeing it, through the eyes of every child who falls in love with reading in one of the story houses, through every adult who discovers they can change their life at any age, through every person who decides to plant seeds of hope instead of harvesting only bitterness." On the last day of the festival, Sarah went up to the Treehouse porch for a moment of personal reflection. From there, she could see all the activity of the event: families walking among the bookstalls, children listening to stories under other trees, adults participating in creative writing workshops. It was a scene she could never have imagined 10 years earlier, when she arrived at that place as a refugee from her own life. She picked up the notebook where she usually wrote and began a new letter to Benjamin. "Dear Journey Companion, 10 years have passed since I first stepped onto the ladder of this treehouse. 10 years since I discovered you had prepared all of this for us, even knowing you wouldn't be here to share it. Today, as I look at this festival full of life and creativity, I completely understand what you meant when you wrote that this house needed movement, life. It wasn't just a refuge for us. It was a center of transformation waiting to be activated. Tyler became the writer you always dreamed of being. His stories have the fantasy and adventure you created, but with the social sensitivity he developed from seeing our struggles and triumphs. Chloe became an incredible visual artist, able to transform into images the feelings that words sometimes can't express. She has illustrated several of your tales and says she feels you guiding her hand when she draws. Arthur revealed himself to be the brother you always knew he was, beneath the fights and misunderstandings. He took care of us with the dedication of someone making up for lost years, but also with the genuine love of someone who understands that family is a daily choice. And I became the woman you said I could be. The writer who discovered her own voice. The mother who teaches by example that it's possible to start over as many times as necessary. The person who transforms pain into purpose and loneliness into community. The treehouse became a symbol of unexpected possibilities. People come from distant places to see it, not because it's physically special, but because it represents the idea that it's possible to grow upward even when your roots are small. Her books are being read in schools in dozens of countries. Children who speak languages you never learned are meeting the characters you created, learning values you considered important. But what makes me proudest is that we managed to go beyond preserving your legacy. We created our own legacy, based on the premise you established but expanded with our own discoveries and contributions. Today, there are people here from places we didn't even know existed, all telling stories of how they managed to change their lives after reading about our experience. It's a great responsibility, but also an immense joy. Thank you for believing I would be capable of transforming the seed you planted into an entire forest. Thank you for preparing everything with such care that even today, 10 years later, we still discover details that show how much you worried about us. Thank you for giving me Tyler and Chloe, who became my partners on this journey of helping other people discover their own potential. And thank you for teaching me, even without being here, that true love is the kind that keeps bearing fruit long after the person is no longer physically present. Your story didn't end when you left. It just gained new narrators. With infinite love and eternal gratitude, Sarah, Tyler, Chloe, and Arthur, the family you created, and that keeps growing. When she finished writing, Sarah put the letter away with all the others she had written to Benjamin over the years. One day, maybe Tyler and Chloe would want to read them, to better understand the journey the family had taken. The festival ended with a storytelling show under the stars, where people of all ages shared personal narratives of overcoming and transformation. An 80-year-old woman told how she had gone back to school after becoming a widow. A teenager talked about how poetry helped him get off drugs. A single mother shared the experience of starting her own business after losing her job. "Every story here represents a seed that germinated," Sarah said, as she closed the event. "Some grew slowly, others grew fast, but all grew toward the light. The treehouse taught me that it doesn't matter where you're planted, it matters where you decide to grow, and that the best stories are the ones that inspire other people to write their own." When everyone had left and the property returned to its usual silence, the family gathered in the treehouse living room for an intimate conversation. "So now what?" Chloe asked. "What's the next chapter?" "Now we keep doing what we've always done," Sarah replied. "Planting seeds, tending to what grows, and helping other people discover that they too can be gardeners of their own lives." "But with some new projects," Tyler added excitedly. "I'm thinking of writing a book about all the interesting people we've met through the foundation. And I want to create a series of illustrations about different kinds of tree houses around the world," Chloe added. "And I'll keep making sure everything is done responsibly and transparently," Arthur said, "so the money is well spent and the right people are helped." "Then it's decided," Sarah smiled. "We'll keep growing." That night, she went up to the porch for her ritual of stargazing. It was a practice she had kept since the first days in the treehouse, a daily moment of gratitude and reflection. Looking up at the starry sky, she thought of all the people who had been touched by the story of the treehouse, thousands of children who had become more interested in reading, hundreds of adults who had discovered hidden talents, dozens of communities that had gained their own cultural spaces. But she thought mainly of the people closest to her, Tyler and Chloe, who had grown up seeing that it is possible to turn difficulties into opportunities, Arthur, who had rediscovered the meaning of family, and herself, who had discovered she was far stronger and more creative than she had ever imagined. The treehouse swayed gently in the night wind, but it was a comforting motion, like a cradle rocking those inside. Sarah felt embraced not only by the wooden walls, but by the entire history that place represented. "Thank you, my love," she whispered to the wind, knowing Benjamin would hear her somehow, "for preparing all of this, for believing in us, for planting the best seed anyone could plant, the seed of hope." The wind seemed to answer, rustling the leaves of the tree in a soft melody that sounded like a tender approval. Sarah smiled and went inside, ready to sleep and dream of all the projects still to come, all the stories yet to be written, all the lives yet to be transformed. The treehouse would continue to be what it always was, not just a home, but a symbol that it is possible to grow in any direction when you have strong roots and are not afraid to reach for the sky. And the story of Benjamin, Sarah, Tyler, Chloe, and Arthur would continue to spread across the world, one seed at a time, one family at a time, one hope at a time. Because the best stories have no end. They simply gain new chapters, new narrators, new possibilities to inspire others to discover that they too can be the protagonists of their own journeys of transformation. The treehouse remained there, solid and welcoming, ready to continue sheltering dreams, cultivating talents, and proving that sometimes life's strangest offers can turn out to be the most precious gifts anyone can receive. End of story. This was a fictional story created to touch our hearts. Now tell us what you thought. Do you believe Sarah made the right decisions? Which moment moved you the most? Share your reflections in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring stories.